Greetings, I'm Doc V. I saw an article recently. Someone put together a nice collage of sculptures that were ancient sculptures of Egyptian kings and Egyptian pharaohs. And interestingly enough, the noses were broken off of these sculptures. Now, I'm familiar with the collection of data and conversation about the noses being broken off of these pharaohs and these Egyptian kings. But the person that put this together made a nice collage where it had about 7 or 8 different kings and queens and pharaohs and Egyptian artifacts that showed the noses broken off. Even the Sphinx, the Great Sphinx near the Great Pyramid of Giza, they showed that, and they showed some other sculptures of some of the kings and the queens back in that era. Well, interestingly enough, the noses were broken off because the noses, I believe, depicted the culture of these particular kings and pharaohs. Let me get to the point. They were of African descent. Blacks or people of African descent have a unique bone structure. And one of the most prominent unique things, is the nose. We have a broad nose. The noses were broken off because I believe people wanted to hide the fact that it was black people, people of African descent, who were once great leaders, pharaohs. Some of the main characters in the Bible that you read were of African descent. Now, this is old news, but this is something new I'm going to add to it. This is the twist I'm going to add. A friend of mine, we've been friends since childhood. He's non-black. And I sent him the article with the pictures of the sculptures with the noses broken. And I said, this is some of the evidence that proves that the great history and the great culture of black people is still being hidden and covered up. So what he did was he went and Googled. And when he Googled, this was so interesting to me. When he Googled, Google says that the noses were broken off of these sculptures because people believed that if you broke the nose off, you would kill their spirit. You would kill their power. And I said, you really believe that? Who thought of that? And I mentioned to him that Google is also regulated by the government. Strict government regulations on Google. You don't see these regulations on TikTok and YouTube to a degree, but there's some publications and there's some platforms where the government backs off of that. So the point I'm trying to make is people will try and bend and try to hide the truth. But history shows us that black people were once kings and queens, were once rulers, were once the top of the pyramid, the top of the totem pole. But this information has been hidden and it has been suppressed. There have been times in history, and I've talked about it in the past, when communities, black communities, began to grow and thrive and flourish, and they were cut down. They were cut down because they became a threat. And people used things like eminent domain, which means the government has use of this property. Or they wanted to build a lake on top of a black community. Or the black community was committing crimes, so to speak, so we had to destroy it. This is ongoing. Racism has not changed. Systemic racism has not changed. Things are better. Things have improved. But there is still a hidden war that pits the elites against people and cultures that do not look like they look. Will this change? Will it change in my lifetime? I don't know. I know that inbreeding happens, and the black race is a dominant gene that when there's inbreeding, that person is considered black. So maybe in 1,000 years from now, I'll be long gone, unless Jesus or God comes in and manifests his kingdom on earth and in heaven. If we continue to go on, there's going to be some inbreeding. There's going to be some interlocking of races and cultures. But there is a fight and there is a fear of this happening by certain people. They don't want this to happen. They want there to be a supreme race and then subcultures. Things have changed. Things are better. No longer will you see black people being hung from trees and shot for no reason, and there are no consequences. Things have changed. But now things are done systematically with housing, with jobs, with opportunities, with incarcerations. There is still a ways to go. We've come a long ways, but there's still a fight. Now, what are the spiritual implications? I can only speculate. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why our people are faced with certain barriers and certain obstacles. But I do know, that there is a God in heaven, and he sees, and he is in control. And there's going to be a tearing away, there's going to be a cutting down and a building up, and there's going to be establishment of justice. I don't know if it's going to be in my lifetime. I don't know how it's going to happen, but God sees it, and God is going to intervene, and he has a wonderful and beautiful and perfect plan. Yes, I'm outside in the dark, but the message is still being communicated. Breaking the noses off of these archaeological finds, because you do not want people to know that great kings and rulers were builders of these great megalithic structures, pyramids, carvings, buildings, beautiful edifices, incredible. Modern man still speculates and ponders and wonders, how in the world did these people build this? And what's more shocking to the wider WIDER society, as these were black people. And this information, still, they try to hide it. Go to YouTube, go to Google, go to your library. Look closely at the artwork. Look closely at the figures. Look past the nose. Look at the bone structure. Look at the eyes. Look at the teeth, the lips, the ears, the shoulders, the proportions of the body. Black people were powerful and were significant through all of history. I'm Doc B, and I'll see you next time.